Hi guys, it's Coach Anthony back at you with another edition of Animate, bringing chess to life. Continuing our Meet the Team series, today's piece is the final member of the long range family. It is no other than Her Majesty, the Queen, the most powerful piece on the board. She is the mighty Queen. The great news is, you already know her movements. How's that, you may ask? Well, the Queen is really a combination of a rook and bishop. And if you haven't done so already, check out the rook and bishop videos. For those of you who have, let's recap. The Queen, acting like a rook, she can go up the file, down the file, or across the ranks. Also, moving like a bishop, it means the Queen also has the X factor, and she can go up the diagonal, down the diagonal, and remembering there's more than one diagonal, we get the same thing. I would like you to pause your video and try and work out how many possible squares the Queen can go to. Hopefully you did pause your video, so let's check out the answer. So once again we saw the Queen moving like a rook went up the file. She could also go down the file. She could also go across the rank, and moving like a bishop, she could go up the diagonal, down the diagonal. Remembering there's more than one diagonal, there you go, we get the same thing again. And when we check it out, the answer is 27 squares. Now, I'm wondering how many of you took the shortcut, remembering that she's really a rook and a bishop. If we remember that a rook could go to how many squares? 14. And a bishop could go to how many squares? 13. There you go, 27 squares. Okay guys, to show the strengths of the Queen, I've drafted in those little guys once again, those minions, those pawns. And I'm hoping that the green arrow may have alerted your attention. But I'm wondering if you can already work out what the green arrow is all about. Hopefully, you're thinking to yourself, if the Queen can land on the square D7, well, it can then show the weaknesses of the pawns, which is that they can't protect themselves from the sides. Now, the Queen being a rook should be used aggressively to attack weaknesses. So, without further delay, there we go, the Queen lands on D7, and all of those pawns on the 7th rank are in serious trouble. The only question is, which little guy is going to make a run for it? Okay, well, even though that little guy made a run for it, we've still got two potential little guys that we can take out. Which one would you take out? The pawn on the B7 square? Or the pawn on the E7 square? Well, I've decided I want to take out the pawn on the E7 square so that the Queen, as you can see, has got a triple attack on these little guys. These little guys are in serious trouble, aren't they? Well, another one's made a run for it, but unfortunately that leaves the C5 pawn all by itself. So therefore, it's a goner. Again, the queen is now attacking another two little guys. And the question is, what is black going to do about it? Now, that's a great idea. As we said, when pawns are side by side, they can create a chain. So now the pawn on f5 is feeling pretty good. Says to the queen, I dare you to come and take me. But the queen simply laughs and says, I am going to take the pawn on a7 instead. So as we can see, the queen once again is now attacking the pawn on b7. So what will that poor little guy do? Well, black's decided to make a run for it, hoping that when we take the pawn on b7, it will cost us one move, which may help the little guy ending up on f4 to reach the end of the board faster. But we also can notice how the queen, even though it sits on the square a7, it can use its properties of a bishop to stop the pawn, because we see the pawn has to pass through the square f2, but as long as the queen sits on a7, it's eyeing this. But remember what we said, we need to use the queen aggressively. So bye bye to the pawn on b7, and we can see that the unit that's left is really trying to work together. Now, there are many different squares we can go to. There are many different ideas here. I'm going to use a very sneaky one, and that is to land the queen on the square f3. What does this do? Well, we see the queen is directly attacking the pawn on f4. The other pawns are in a pawn chain, which is great, which means the pawn on h5 is nice and happy because it's protected by the pawn on g6. The only problem is it's black's turn to move, and any move doesn't seem to help the position. And as a recap, I'm wondering if you can remember what we call that in chess. You got it. It's Zugzwang. So black has to find a move, and unfortunately any move just doesn't help. So this leaves the h5 pawn ready for the taking. And once again we see that even though we do have a wonderful pawn chain, but it's the f4 pawn that's protected. Unfortunately, the g5 pawn is not protected. And here's the real problem. If the pawn on f4 decides to make a run for it, the queen, once again using its properties as a bishop, is just ready and waiting. So unfortunately, the minions are really stuck between a rock and a hard place. So as we can see, it's definitely all over, gobbledy, and finally the last juicy snack. Excellent work by the queen. The queen is a very valuable piece, and because of this we have to be careful where we place her lest she falls into enemy hands. The queen has very few weaknesses, however she does belong to the long range family, which means she loves space and hates being blocked. The queen, unlike a normal bishop, can move on different color diagonals. So in summary, the queen is a rook and a bishop She is the most powerful member of the team. She is the attacker supreme. Okay guys, please like and subscribe, and see you all on the next video.